human beings are perhaps the only of God's countless creatures granted knowledge of the inevitability of death. But on a day like this, we are, in a most cruel way, reminded of just how pointless and how worthless that knowledge is. Because in its wake, death assuredly leaves us defeated and frustrated, bitter and helpless. On days like this, we tearfully turn to God, our Maker, with a myriad questions. Questions which we soon realize will not even be answered on this side of our existence. As a Christian fraternity, we shall later this week be reminded of the suffering and death of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the peak of his torture on the cross, we shall be reminded this Friday, precisely at around 3 p.m., of Jesus' agonizing cry, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. We know what that means. My God, why have you forsaken me? In the sharpest edge of suffering and in the deepest end of our grief, we too get there as our faith is tested to the limit, as we seek to ask God, why? Or even, where were you? To the family of Rita, the Yapan family, to my brother Robert Nagila, and to beautiful Mia, we share your pain and stand with you. We humbly come to you at this time like Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, the three friends who visited Job after all the losses he suffered. And like them, we acknowledge today that no words that we speak today will be adequate to take away your grief. My last encounter with Rita was a month ago, right outside this church, next to the bookshop, to be precise. It was Ash Wednesday, the first day of this very Lenten season. Rita was a devout Catholic and a stickler of the church's deep traditions and its very elaborate liturgical calendar. And as the high-pressure nature of the Ash Wednesday Masses, for those who know, hourly Masses here, our encounter ended up really brief. We agreed to catch up soon. It was never to happen. Nevertheless, I will always hold to many great memories of one of the finest human souls. In her core, innermost core, Rita remained in Nairobi as close as possible to the earnest wishes of any mother, a good child, and a meaningful adult. Always proper, always well put together. Now the villager in me is stepping up. And yes, those like me, and like Rita, born and raised up in the rural areas, always tend to judge people on these streets by how much Nairobi has destroyed them. And trust me, nothing beats a rural eye, that eye of a Shags Mondo, when it comes to impact assessment. Rita withstood the polluting side of Nairobi, and she died intact. Success, fame, and money did not distort who she was at the core. So, where others get panel beaten by what we in the village call ulimwengu, or what you Nairobians call character development, Rita navigated this complex urban maze and flourished almost entirely out of the unfailing nutrients of good upbringing. I want to mean this as both a sincere tribute to Rita and a compliment to the family that brought up Rita. It is her strength of character and clarity of purpose that made every other story about Rita possible. One such big story, it's shared here many times, is her success in the career as a journalist. Rita was one of the reporters in the NTV newsroom when I joined the Nation Media Group in 2009 as the managing editor of the broadcasting division. We had interacted many times before, especially in the field, covering news, but this became our first time to work closely together in the same newsroom. I quickly got to learn more about her journalistic attributes, such as her strong scripting skills and her legendary ability to beat deadlines. But one attribute always stood out for me: her disposition, her general professional attitude. In journalism, this is a big deal. A good attitude matters, and Rita always displayed the very finest. This made her the jewel of the newsroom. In a reporter, every newsroom leader looks for reliability, and Rita personified reliability. Rita's greater possibilities came alive in 2010 when we started pushing the limits of live television news, among other ambitious editorial experiments at NTV. As the Nation Media Group marked 50 years of its existence, we rolled out our first start-to-end outdoor news bulletins from the KICC. Later in the year, we had the referendum on the Constitution, with our rolling coverage starting 3 days ahead of the August 4, 2010 vote on the new Constitution. I remember in her referendum day sign-off, Rita's 3 words somehow ring sad today: "This is it." It was after the 2010 referendum that Rita was introduced to anchoring news, when we launched a live, on-location 3-day TV magazine weekender called the County Edition, for which I was ably assisted to produce by Joe Ageo, who was the head of news production, and Emmanuel Juma, who was the head of news gathering. For the toil and sweat this took, I will not at this point separate the story of Rita from that of every member of one of the greatest broadcast newsrooms ever assembled in Kenya's media history. Rita's County Edition colleagues share every bit of that glory, as does the entire team that spectacularly and comprehensively covered the South Sudan independence referendum and the Ugandan elections immediately after. I am certain that Rita's spirit, floating above us right now, draws most of its smiles from those amazing memories and experiences. And I'm sure, colleagues, that Rita's spirit is proud of each one of you. I will not avoid to talk about Rita's physical attributes. As a journalistic, editorially ascertainable fact, Rita was beautiful. Secondly, she was smart, mentally and physically. Rita was an impeccable dresser. Fashion was her friend. She favored serious business like suits and trendy, even if with feminine cuts. There would be an occasion for a jeans trouser for a rough news gathering day, but the bottom line, Rita always dressed very smartly. One time, a persistent villager in me dared me to advise a member to dress like Rita. The next day, I bumped onto the subject of my advice, and the question came, so am I dressed like Rita? My village instincts picked this very quickly, that this is not a question. It was an invitation to war. To my younger colleagues managing newsrooms, just learn how to communicate with ladies. Don't you dare draw parallels, even if in the name of freedom of expression. At this point, I still struggle to believe this is all about death. And indeed, the death of Rita Tinina Yapan. So I'd best take it back where we began. That is, back to God's own doorstep. In probing the depth of the mystery of death, we may have to settle on some assumptions like, maybe, just maybe, God grants us life as a loan. And just maybe, that loan that our life is does not even have a repayment schedule. And maybe God can recall that loan as He wills. On Friday, this coming Good Friday, we shall be reminded of that very final cry of Jesus before He died on the cross. Father, unto you I commit my spirit. And to God we commit the spirit of Rita Tinina Yapan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.